Well, it's been kind of a long time, guys, but Fordham basketball is back, baby. Welcome to episode number 11 of the College Hoops 2K Legacy Mode series, featuring our main man, Coach Carter, as he tackles his first offseason up here in the Bronx. As always, these offseason videos are always jam-packed with content, so if you want to skip ahead, I'll have timestamps for everything we cover today in my comment down below. But without further ado, let's jump in. If you want to think back to how Season 1 ended, it was honestly kind of embarrassing. Despite an ugly first season up here, Coach Carter's troops had a chance to put all of the losing behind them. If we won our last two games of the season, we would have clinched the final spot in the Atlantic 10 Conference Tournament. But despite those last two games coming against Duquesne and Rhode Island, two of the other worst teams in the A10, we both lost both those games. So we ended up not clinching that spot. Duquesne took the final spot, and we finished year one with a 6-20 record. And for the first time in Coach Carter's career, no postseason basketball was played. This was a culture shock for Coach Carter, and I'm sure a shock for you guys as well. We've grown so accustomed to winning after our awesome career at UT Martin, and after starting the season 3-4, it seemed like we were going to exceed some expectations. But that infamous 11-game losing streak, where we failed to break 60 points in all but just two of those outings, brought us right back down to earth, and we just couldn't pick up the pieces to finish with a respectable record. Coach Carter looks to turn over a new leaf today, beginning his first offseason in search of a fresh start. And as tradition, we always start our off seasons with the player recaps, and I think after the month-long hiatus from this series, both you and I could use some refreshers on how our 5 graduating seniors and the rest of our roster played this season. So starting with the first of our 5 seniors, point guard Rashad Pollard. Pollard was a pretty decent player in his senior year overall. He was pretty consistent through and through, and he was our best perimeter defender, and he got pretty hot near the end of the season. We were in the middle of fighting for a playoff spot, and he started scoring a couple double-digit point outings here and there. Pollard led the Fordham Rams in steals, and point guard is going to be probably the biggest question mark on the roster next year. All 3 point guards on the roster are graduating, which may lead to some speculation that this guy right here will be making the transition to become our new signal caller for year 2. With his carefree style of play and oozing confidence, Preston Murphy quickly became a fan favorite for you guys in Season 1, and he cracked the starting 5 only a handful of games in. Murphy finished his second season as our second leading scorer. He paced all players in threes made and percentage, but went through an ice-cold phase nearing the end of Season 1, which was a big reason why we struggled to even reach the last seed in that A10 conference tournament. Murph may be better suited at the point guard spot next year. He's going to be our best ball handler on paper. And I think a reason why he went through that rough patch in the end of the year was because Murphy's proved that he's much more comfortable shooting off the bounce, and that was evident with how well he was shooting on the move. But whenever we saw Murphy operating off the catch in the second half of the year much more than he did in the first half, that's when he started to struggle. So playing point guard may put Murphy in his best position to succeed, where he can look for a shot off the bounce more. And this offense, it may also be helped out as we are desperately looking for anything to add a punch in any way we can on that side of the floor. Evangelo Higgins had a tale of 2 halves this season as well. He was out of the blocks fast, leading the team in scoring for a pretty good amount of time, including hitting the game-winning shot against Fresno State for our first win in series history. However, once Murphy broke ground into the starting lineup, that meant Evo had to transition to the small forward, and it was clear to see that he's just more comfortable at the 2, where he can better use his lanky frame to score other smaller guys. Perhaps Murphy's potential move to the point could present Evo Higgins the opportunity to return where he's most comfortable. He proved he can impact the game in other ways as well this season. 3 rebounds a night, team leader in assists, and a proven on-ball defender, but you would like to see his defensive instincts away from the ball improve. AJ Ollie will be a big loss for us, becoming our quiet leader throughout Season 1. As Higgins and Murphy went through their droughts, Ollie was super consistent on both sides of the ball all the way through year 1. He made over half his field goal and 3-point attempts, and triumphed Evo and nearly Murphy in points per game by season end, while simultaneously finishing top 4 on the team in the 5 main stat categories. But nothing more important by Ollie's body of work was his veteran presence. You almost never saw him celebrating. He was always focused on the task at hand, and he helped us through both the good times and the bad ones over this tough season. And he is a player I wish we had more than one season to coach. Definitely going to be missing AJ Ollie, our highest overall senior, graduating. Rounding out the starting five, we have Cade Sorensen, someone who has a lot to like, but also a lot to improve on heading into his final season of college basketball. Sorensen was one of the better shot blockers in the A10, but when our schedule became infused with a bunch of perimeter-oriented teams in a row around the middle of the year, his defensive numbers went down. Still, Cade had a nice finish to his season on O with a couple of double-digit scoring performances in the twilight of Season 1. So you saw a little bit of a bump in his points per game. However, coming into the series, Sorensen's lack of efficiency in the years before Coach Carter came on campus definitely caught our eye, and we hoped that better shot selection would be the key in fixing that, but so far that's not been the case, finishing with the same field goal percentage as he did the year before we got here with 38%. His struggles seem to come whenever he's forced to score in the half court when post defenders are already set up, but off of putbacks, he's lights out. It will help him find his identity on offense, hopefully, because that's the only thing that's stopping him from becoming a sweet two-way anchor in the middle. He's an awesome rebounder, especially on offense. We just need to see his efficiency improve. Sure, losing AJ Ali is going to hurt, but the power forward position should be in good hands, as we are going to see a junior college transfer formerly step into the limelight at the Ford, Fabian Swanson. His first season in the big leagues was a success, proving that he's capable of becoming one of the more consistent sources of offense on this team. Sorensen had an awesome year, and his best game was against the 14th ranked team in the country, St. Louis. It was already a lost season at that point, so we didn't expect much coming into that game, but on the road, we came within a possession of beating them, and Swanson was the best player on the floor for us in that game. I think he's my breakout candidate for Season 2. He's got a light out mid-range shot, he's comfortable with putting the ball on the deck, and he plays bigger than what he is on the defensive side, almost a block a game averaged on only 15 minutes a night. If it's not Swanson making his big breakout, I think it'll be Stan Scott, whose stock continued to rise throughout his junior season. Scott didn't have a role to begin this season, struggling to log minutes because of the emergence of Murphy and Higgins, and this became a pressing storyline at the beginning of the series, because Coach Carter likes Scott's archetype a lot. He's a plus athlete who starts to break well because the defensive motor is so high, and he also shot over 30% from 3. But Scott made it known he was unhappy with the lack of PT at the beginning of the year, so to avoid a potential transfer from a pretty dynamic player, Carter made Stanton a pretty main bench player in the second half of the year, and he turned heads, including a 17-point performance where he hit 4 threes. Depending on how Coach Carter moves around Murphy, Scott could become a starter, most likely at the 3, and he'd earned it, because he was highly efficient when he finally got some time, and it could pay off letting it rip with him at the 3 in the starting 5. He could fit very well with Evo and Murphy. I think he could play really well off those two. Amir Holiday was another first-year player who showed some flashes in Fordham. He played 2 years of D2 ball in Cali, and his spot-up shooting translated pretty well to the A10. Holiday shot 35% on 35 attempts from 3 this season, was at his best on the fast break, and he'll definitely be in line for an expanded role in Season 2, perhaps becoming even our 6th man. Nick Nystrom had a pretty up and down senior year as our backup point guard. 1.5 assists per game in 10 minutes is pretty respectable, and he had a 3-point shot that you had to go out and cover, but his biggest flaw was that he'd go quiet for certain points. He'd have a nice game here and there, and then you wouldn't hear from him for a little while in a couple games, and then he'd come back and have another good one. Nonetheless, with all 3 point guards on file graduating, it's time we finally get to work on finding some replacements. Hassan Rivera is the 4th senior moving on and was actually our day 1 starter at small forward. Unfortunately, he just couldn't find his footing at the beginning of the season. His only real breakout game was 17 points versus Fresno State. Rivera actually dropped back in the rotation in favor of Murphy and Stan Scott, and by the time the season was over, he was more often than not a DMP-CD, did not play coach's decision. He just didn't have any standout skill to find a niche. Kasuke Takahashi found some extra time near the end of the season due to AJ Ali dealing with some injuries. He was dinged up for a little bit near the end of the season, and Takahashi had some decent showings here and there, but it doesn't seem like he'll ever become more than just a space eater next year as a senior. Vernell Didion is the 5th and final senior, didn't play much in his final year, and joining the rotation next season, coming off a redshirt year, it's 6'7" forward KJ Bigsby. He'll start his career in the mid-60 overall range, and we are still not sure what position he'll play. He has the frame, shooting skill, and athleticism of a 3, but he also lacks a good handle and is an above-average rebounder for a team that needs some down low. He is the definition of a tweener. I'm excited to see how he does as we try to find where he's best suited. It's just a question on where he's going to play, because I think with his shooting and rebounding, Bigsby could be pretty solid off the bench. So now it's time to recap all postseason basketball. First things first, we have our conference tournament, which I was an idiot and I accidentally simmed the title game. I had autosave on. I don't know what happened. I'm just a moron. So unfortunately, I can't show you the title game, but it was a pretty good one. So we had Charlotte and we had St. Louis. So the 49ers throwing in an upset there in the mix. We actually saw Richmond there finish 7th in the country. But the 49ers beat them in the semifinals, and then we'll take on the 12th ranked St. Louis Billikens, and the Niners take it home. They are your A10 conference champions here in season 1. Richmond was one of the hottest teams in the country, but the Niners take them down and take down the defending champs St. Louis, who they're coming off a 16-0 conference record last season, but they cannot repeat the cycle this time around. So with the Niners as the A10 conference champions, we're going to hop into the NCAA tournament here in season 7, if you will, I guess season 1 of the Fordham series, where the number 1 overall seed Maryland putting in some work. They had a scare against LSU and then take down the Trojans. No real shockers so far, as Georgia Tech, though, their reign of terror finally ends. Back-to-back champions, but they finally get a little bit weaker. They've had trouble, picking up the pieces from those back-to-back championships we saw whenever we were at UT Martin. They're starting to get a little bit younger, and they cannot make it 3 in a row. So moving down, we see Mississippi State with a little bit of a shocker. Then we see Temple and Richmond, 2 A10 teams play. The Owls almost get the best of the Spiders until the Richmond faces V-Tech, and Virginia Tech was a very scary team last year for a high seed. They put in the work against the Spiders, so it's either going to be out of the East, it's going to be Maryland or V-Tech, but it will be the Terps, and a 7-point win as our first Final Four representation. So we're moving down to the West region, where we see our boys UT Martin, now coached by head coach A. Falls. Well, they're gonna fall in the first round to the Fighting Illini in a pretty one-sided affair. Barton, the point guard, lit up UT Martin, 22 points for the Fighting Illini guard, and then we see Darnay Betancourt as his senior year wraps up with a measly 3 points playing with foul trouble. Rashawn Martin actually had a good game, and Teron Gardner, who ended up winning Ohio Valley Conference Player of the Year, had one of the best seasons you'll ever see, and that I'm happy for him, obviously, but we were trying so hard to finally have a player win Player of the Year in the Ohio Valley while we were there. We couldn't do it, and our first season away from Martin, Tennessee, Teron Gardner wraps up the hardware, so I'm very happy to see him do that, but dang, man, I wish we could have been coaching him while he had his dream season. So we see St. Louis. They hang with Kentucky for a little bit, but the Wildcats pull away as they continue to wreck the competition as we move down here. Still looking for perhaps a Cinderella, and we see perhaps 2 in the same side of the West region. How about Seton Hall and Louisiana Calcutta, both winning their first round affairs, and then Seton Hall, they will beat down Calcutta and then take down Gonzaga as well. So Gonzaga, they're in the Sweet 16 every year. In real life, they've been in it since 2015, but they cannot once again finish the job. So Kentucky, they round out the West region, so it'll be Kentucky taking down Seton Hall in the Elite Eight. They'll be taking on the Terps on one side of the Final Four. So now in the South region, we see Arkansas going down. Our first 1 seed that we don't see survived the first weekend. It'll be Oregon State and Florida State, and the Seminoles make it out of the top half of the South region. So now we're starting to see the upsets become a little bit more, they're coming more often here in the second and third brackets. We see Houston making some noise and then blowing the doors off of the Orangemen. Syracuse had a great season, 30 wins. We actually opened up the season against them, but unfortunately Houston ends their reign of terror. So now it'll be Houston versus Florida State and the Cougars by 7. Wow, okay. Ralph Sampson has his boys ready to play in both real life and in the virtual March Madness. So we're moving down to the final bracket. It's the Midwest region, where we see another 1 seed trip up at the gates. We see the Cyclones of Iowa State, 13-point win over the Louisville Cardinals, and then they handle the Bearcats of Cincy pretty easily after they survived an upset in the first round against Wisconsin Green Bay. Iona makes the March Madness bracket. This year they were 13 seed, coached by, of course, Rick Pitino. We're going to be seeing them next year. I wanted to put the MAAC winners on Fordham's schedule next year, so Iona will definitely be on our schedule. They might be our home opener, if I remember correctly. Moving down here, we see Texas with a pretty interesting batch of games. They're only scoring 38 against Penn State, but getting the win. And then they barely lose to the Washington Cougars, who have won a championship in this series before. I don't remember what year, but I remember they were in it, I believe, twice. And one of those times they won it. So it'll be either Washington or Iowa State, and the 9th seed falls by a basket to Washington. So moving on to the Final Four, we see Kentucky beat Maryland pretty handily, and then Houston, they will take down Washington. So the 3-seeded Cougars cannot make it their 3rd appearance in the Natty here in this Coach Carter series. Instead, it'll be David versus Goliath, the 1-seed 30-win Kentucky Wildcats against the 30-win Houston Cougars from Conference USA. A pretty even matchup on paper. And yeah, we're going to take a look at some of these stats for both teams. This title game is very interesting. Both sides have almost identical team stats, but there is a few differences that I'll talk about more when it's game time. For now, we're going to highlight this awesome interior battle. We have Kentucky's Corey Mobley, who led the SEC in points per game this year, and they also have a floor general that makes it all possible. Donovan Ellerbe is everything you want in a leader. Houston's man in the middle is Artavis Leclerc, a 6'9 senior, 17.4 points per game, 1.6 blocks for this guy. But guess what? This team is so deep inside that he doesn't even start for UH. Trey Wood, who stands at 6'10", starts at the 3. He's just as good. Janiro Zerby and Garrett Paschal are the Cougars' front court that starts. And because of this, UH does have a big advantage in rebounds per game and in size. But the burning question is, will they be able to force Kentucky into enough mistakes? The Wildcats, this is a team that barely turns the ball over. At 8 team giveaways a game, this isn't a team that will beat themselves. So here we are. For the first time since season 4, we're going to see a brand new national champion. Georgia Tech, their reign of terror comes to an end. We have Kentucky against Houston here tonight, the first of its kind here in the Fordham Legacy Mode series. So inbounding from the side, only a couple seconds into the game, it's RJ Valentine for the Houston Cougars, finding his way open and finding the friendly shooter's bounce. It's gonna have to be some luck on Houston's side, but also some skill too, because we all know Ralph Sampson. This guy always has his UH Cougars ready to play, whether it's real life or in the game. So back over to UK, from the elbow we see Von Skinner with the pass over to Chris Everett for 3. That is going to be the biggest advantage for the Kentucky Wildcats tonight. 37.5% from 3 as a team on the year compared to Houston's 34% on the dot. So clearly UK has the advantage from downtown, and they are taking full advantage of it. There is Von Skinner for 3. So 10-5 lead for the Wildcats early. Big rebound inside. We're going to have to see a lot of that for Kentucky. However, Donovan Ellerbe with a rare turnover there. It's Trey Wood who missed a shot but busted his butt to get back on defense. Love the effort there. And he will reward his team with a Garrett Paschal 3-point play. Garrett Paschal, he's actually somebody we've seen in this series before. Number 30 right there. The senior was actually a recruit we were going after back at UT Martin. I believe it was year 3 going into year 4. We were recruiting a big man in Texas, and Paschal ended up being a teammate of that interest we had. We didn't get that big man, but I do remember being in love with Paschal's game, but unfortunately we just never had a chance at him. 4-star recruit. He decided to stay into his hometown, or rather home states here in Houston, and he's playing for something huge. So that's always cool to see guys make reappearances in these series, especially College Hoops 2K8. So now 8 minutes left to play here in the first half. We see RJ Valentine for number 2. And that one looked very similar to the one he had earlier, except didn't have the friendly bounce like he did on the first one, as this one's swung ahead by Donovan Ellerbe. And it will be Malik Gordon topping off the break. Yet another senior. Both of them are Ellerbe and Malik Gordon. And speaking of seniors, this team has a lot of it. We have 8 seniors on this Kentucky team that see ample playing time, perhaps even in the virtual 2K. I'll get back to that in a second. But we see Corey Mobley getting dunked on by Trey Wood. He's probably the best athlete on the floor in this game. The 6'10", 6'10" junior, 12 points, 5 rebounds a game. You see why he starts over Artavis Leclerc. Obviously, Leclerc an awesome talent, but Trey Wood, he'll give you some shooting, and he'll give you some highlight reel plays just like that. So Houston with their first lead of the night, as this one's now blocked. On the floor, it's Chris Everett, but it's taken away by Steele. And up ahead, it'll be Trey Wood with the extra pass to Stetton Zuzak. A 6'6" sophomore who averages 3.5 points per game and has made 15 tray balls on the year. Make that 16 now. So all of a sudden, a huge run for Houston, but like I was saying, with 8 seniors for Kentucky, perhaps even the Blue Bloods following the 4-year player deal we're starting to see come back in real-life college basketball. But all of a sudden, look at all these turnovers for Kentucky. This is very unlike the UK Wildcats to be turning over the ball at this rate. 7.8 turnovers per game, and here comes another sloppy one off the inbound. All of a sudden, Houston taking control. It's 39-27 with the snap of a finger. RJ Valentine for his second steal, and it will be Hart topping this one off. So the Cougars in control, 44-30. All of a sudden, Kentucky lost their bearing and couldn't hold on to the basketball. 7 turnovers. They're already pretty much at their season average at the break, and they're also not making as good as you'd hoped on their 3-point attempts. 4 for 11, and Houston's hot from 3, making half of their shots from behind the line. So, heading into the second half now, Kentucky's going to have some work to do. All of a sudden, they were down big at the half, and we're going to see this one rotate over to Nate Singley, and that'll be a mid-range shot that goes. Singley, a 6'3" senior, averages 9.5 points, 4.5 assists. He's tied with Donovan Ellerbe in that category for assists, as Ellerbe's off the mark from 3. Still a 14-point lead for the Houston Cougars, and you can still see they are oozing with confidence. Take a look at this tray ball. Okay, Garrett Paschal will find RJ Valentine. 17 points for RJ, and then Nate Singley. He pretty much replicates what that Kansas point guard did near the end of the real-life national championship. However, this one is a lot less high leverage because Kentucky just cannot hold on to the basketball, and they've already eclipsed their season average in turnovers per game. We're going to jump ahead here to less than 4 minutes to play. 68-53, Houston still in control. What a backdoor feed off the screen and roll. How about Trey Wood's 7th assist? What can't this kid do? He can hit the 3. He can play make for his teammates. And there is Garrett Paschal with another basket. 76-60. It's been a couple years since we've seen a pretty competitive national championship game, and this one will continue that trend. The Houston Cougars, we're in season 7. They are your 7th season national championships, the first of the Fordham era of Coach Carter's career. So we saw some stars. We saw Trey Wood with 20 and 7 assists. We saw RJ hit 5 threes, man. And Garrett Paschal, 15-7, 6 of 6 from the floor. I remember when this kid came out, man, and he impressed me a couple years ago. And we just didn't have a chance to recruit him, but he's another one of these very versatile Houston big men. They didn't even really need Artavis Leclerc. He still played well in 14 minutes, but man, what a showing by Houston, the 6th seed national champions. And for Kentucky, Donovan Ellerbe just did not show up. He himself triumphed Kentucky's season average in turnovers with 8, 1 for 7 from the floor. And you'd be hard-pressed to find a Kentucky Wildcat that actually showed up today. Man, all of a sudden, Houston started making UK play their style of ball, and that's what made the difference. So we're going to transition into the awards across the country and within the A10 here in Season 1. Dustin Brockman, I remember we played him a couple times back at Memphis, and he became one of the best big men ever in college basketball. Mid-major player of the year, Tim Wooten from UALR. And we got coach of the year, goes to the Maryland coach who didn't survive into the Final Four, so that's a pretty interesting pick right there. DPOY, Gilbert White, we played him last year in the Sweet 16 back at UT Martin, almost beat Georgia Tech. And then Dustin Brockman, one of the best college basketball seasons of all time. Freshman of the year, Jaquil Keegan on Ohio State, 11 points for the 6'7" freshman out of Savannah, Georgia. First team All-American, we got Bo Ash from North Carolina State, Will Harper, 18 points for the Arkansas 2-guard, Salvatore Martinez. Love that name. Dustin Brockman, of course, and we see Isaac Schaefer, a 7'4" big man from Northwestern, 21 points per game for him. Here on second team All-American, we see an Idaho point guard, Stephon Farmer, averaging 20 points per game and 4 assists. Kenny Sweetney from UVA. And then we also see Old Dominions of some of the smaller conferences with some nice representation here on the second team All-American, a UCF big man, and then Sergio Mabongo on the South Carolina Gamecocks. Freshman All-American, we see Garrett Greer from Oregon, 5 assists per game. He paced all freshmen in that category. Jaquil Keegan, Eddie Mims from WVU, Ernie Ozier from Boston College, and then DeAndre Perry. I told you guys, he is going to be a beast for years to come, somebody to watch out for as Charlotte tries to defend their title in our conference. So first team all conference, we see Johnny Winbush from UMass, Cedric Lattimore, Tamir Armstrong, Denzel Patton, and then Albert McKenzie for first team all conference in the A10. With Albert McKenzie, of course, winning A10 Player of the Year. Second team all-conference, can't imagine we'd see a Fordham player here, and we don't. Robert Mooney from Charlotte, Jonathan Odom from Richmond, Bryce Sherrington from St. Louis, Nathan Lutz from Charlotte, and Denard Springer from Temple. So, a lot of seniors on these lists, as Nathan Lutz is the only underclassman, along with DeAndre Perry on these lists. So, freshman all-conference, Kyle Kingman, Adrian Duffy, and then we see Scott Polite from Xavier, and then JC Palmer from St. Joe's, and DeAndre Perry from Charlotte. So Perry collecting a lot of hardware. He's going to be a double-double machine for years to come in the conference. So now it's time to get into the meat and potatoes of this off-season, trying to replace these 5 graduating seniors, including 2 of them being starters. With Sean Pollard and AJ Ali, we say goodbye to. Nick Nystrom and Hassan Rivera, they played some minutes here and there, and then Vernell Didion. So all 3 of our point guards will leave. But before we get into the recruiting, let's take a look around the conference to see what the other teams are losing. George Washington was a pretty weak team in year 1. We were an overtime loss away from sweeping the season series against these guys. They hit the reset button after losing 4 starters. LaSalle moves on from 6 seniors, including Cliff Colucci and Keaton O'Hara, 2 of the top scorers in the A10 this season. UMass only loses 1 starter, that's big-bodied wing Seth Dennehy. We're moving on to the Rhode Island Rams, finished tied last with yours truly in the A10 standings this year. They lose their 2nd and 3rd leading scorers. And now time for the big one. The A10 champions of the regular season with boatloads of experience. They move on from their 4 starters, their 6-man, and 7 seniors in total. It'll be interesting to see how the Spiders try to defend their title with so many new faces next year. The St. Bonaventure Bonnies will be the next team. They lost A10 Player of the Year, Albert McKenzie inside, and they also lose the services of talented defensive wing Isaiah Dearman. And then a lot of scores lost from St. Joe's. Breon Daly was one of the top 3-point weapons in the league this year, and Denzel Patton was their leading scorer. And now time for St. Louis. We're seeing them come back down to earth a bit with the entirety of their 3-headed attack getting drafted. They have a really talented sophomore guard named Terrell Desmond who looked to become the new face of the franchise moving forward, with their big 3 all moving on, and their starting center also graduating as well. Denard Springer was the top contender for Player of the Year behind Albert McKenzie. He's gone now, along with Temple sniper Daron Coleman. I believe he led the conference in 3-pointers made this season. 2 more talented big men from Xavier hit the shelf in Avery Nwankwo and Lavelle Quinn. They'll also be without 2 more starters, and Tavon Cross, and he actually had a big game against us earlier on the season, and Todd Pinkston. The Charlotte 49ers most likely become the A10 favorites next year, only losing point guard Robert Mooney in their starting 5, so they'll return 4 starters. Dayton becomes one of the youngest teams in the conference, with their top scorers leaving, those 3 guys being Bamba Shimokawa, Darren Rose, and Kyrie Somerville. And Duquesne, like us, must find a new point guard with their top 2 assist leaders graduating. We earned one new attribute this season, achieving it by moving Coach Carter to a mid-major conference, or a bigger conference I should say, and I used that on offense, his rating there, just to bump it up to a C. Just anything to add some more respectability on offense this year will go a long way as we move into the recruiting, which will take up a majority of what's left in this video. So we do have a signee, 3-star point guard Darren Black, but with 9 targets on our board right now, we still have 3 scholarships to hand out. I've added some new players as of recent, and I'll be highlighting the new faces up next. But if you want to see the guys we already covered, check the ending of episode 8. We already went through all the guys, but we're going to be hopping into the new faces starting now. Justin English is the first of our new faces on the board, hopping up to prospect number 5. He's soon to be a sophomore, a 6'4" JUCO prospect, and looks like he can be a plug-and-play guy. He lacks any real lacking grades. He has some tools you can't teach too. He's got high hustle, a B+ graded athlete, and B- potential. That's high enough to work with for sure for the future. We also have someone on the roster who has a very similar story to English as well, Amir Holiday. Both guys born and raised in California. Both guys had to prove themselves at smaller levels of basketball before earning a shot at D1. As we all know, Amir Holiday was a D2 transfer, and I think they'd both get along well. And the El Cajun kid would have someone to feel a little closer to home. He wants good coaching, PT, and a shot at a good program. However, Coach Carter will have to work fast to close the gap with San Diego on this 3-star prospect. So coming up next, we have 6A junior transfer Daryl Keeler. He looks like another guy who could see a lot of floor from day one. Hailing from Jacksonville, Keeler looks like he could become a rich man's Kate Sorensen. Take Sorensen's dominance on the offensive glass and putback ability, add a B+ layup, C+ mid-range, and C+ 3-point ratings, and you're looking at a future jack of all trades on offense. While he looks like a work in progress on defense, that arsenal on the other side of the ball is just too good to pass up. One fatal flaw, however, Keeler's number 2 priority is staying close to home, meaning that something crazy will have to happen down the stretch to try to pry Keeler from Charleston Southern. Prospect number 7 is an insurance policy, a wild card if you will. Milos Filipovic is from Eastern Europe. Not much is known from this 3-star guard outside of a C layup rating and some middle-of-the-road athletic ability. But with these European guys, you can expect a tough, selfless player with some shooting ability, and we're currently in 2nd place for Filipovic. I really like number 8 prospect Regis McBride. The more I read about him, the more I like. A 6'9" big man from Maryland. Coming from JUCO, McBride only has 2 years of eligibility left, but these base ratings are awesome at a first glance. He's got soft hands, good vision, finishing ability, B consistency, and some solid defensive ratings. You're looking at someone who could have a big senior year 2 years from now when Sorensen is gone. We're in a tightly contested battle with GU, which I want to say is Georgetown? I'm not really sure, but pacing all schools is also Mount St. Mary's, a small school from Emmitsburg, Maryland. I spent a lot of time on the Mount's campus in real life. Been to a couple camps there in middle school and high school, so that is a school that's very near and dear to me. But the Mountaineers want to steal a recruit from us, and that would be a huge score for a school as small as them. We got to try to take Regis McBride back from the Mountaineers. Well, these are the guys I added to the board right before the offseason, and I decided to give our 3 scholarships to our number 1 target, flashy guard Brandon Lovelace, 5'9" shooter Ryan Bridges, and superstar athlete 6'2" 2-guard Marcus Neal. It was a hard decision, but with so much turnover in this backcourt, and honestly, we don't know how Preston Murphy's going to do at the point guard next year, I had to prioritize our needs at guard over our wants in the front court, if that makes sense. Like I had to try to stack up on guards rather than take somebody like Regis McBride or these big men that are really jumping out of the page at me. We have to prioritize our needs over our wants right now. So let's see if we can overturn our rotten recruiting luck here. So we've had a lot of ups and downs in recruiting in the regular season, but it's never too late to try to turn the tides in that department. So here we are, the moment of truth. It's out of our hands now. It's up to these kids to make their decisions. Off-season recruiting has started, and Ryan Bridges, our number 2 prospect, signs with somebody else. He did have one of our 3 scholarships. For the 2nd time this season, Marshall takes away a prospect of ours. Brandon Lovelace, our number 1 target, also signs with somebody else. and this was a pretty interesting one. We were 100% interest in Lovelace, but so was High Point, and he ended up taking High Point over Fordham. It's starting to get embarrassing now with all these guys taking these smaller schools over us. Marcus Neal is one that joins the list. I wanted Neal so bad. He was an incredible athlete. Would have been an awesome 2-guard to learn behind Murphy and Higgins, but I guess it's just not to be. So he heads to Tulsa. Daryl Keeler has also signed with somebody else. The awesome, talented offensive big guy stays closer to home with Charleston Southern University. He'll have 3 years of eligibility remaining. Can we get anybody? Come on. Well, that's the first batch of players. So I ended up taking those 3 scholarships that were handed back to us, and I ended up using them on Regis McBride, Chen Lee, and Justin English moving forward, just having Milos Filipovic on the board as an insurance policy. So we're going to sim ahead a little bit longer. Coach Carter trying to work some of that magic. And as we sim ahead, we have some more news. Justin English signs with somebody else. Oh my. Well, we try to give him that pitch that we have Amir Holiday on the roster. They would have been awesome friends, but I guess he just picks home over playing at a bigger school, which was one of his priorities, so I'm not really sure what to say about that one. Moving ahead, I decided to use that extra scholarship on Milos Filipovic. We'll see if it pans out. We'll see if we have enough players to field a roster next year. Well, it won't be Regis McBride on the roster because he signed with somebody else as well. Oh my goodness. Mount St. Mary's, a school very near and dear to me. Had a lot of great memories there, had a lot of camps growing up. Not so near and dear right now. They take away Regis McBride for one of the biggest recruiting scores in the history of their program. Well, time to simulate ahead once again. We're getting closer, guys. We're like 3 weeks away from the next season. Finally, Chen Lee signs with Fordham. Yep, a round of applause. Let's hear it. Let's go. Chen Lee. He's back, and even though he's an overseas player, which means that we're not going to know a lot about him, there are some skills that we did unlock from him that we do like. Some good rebounding ratings and some decent mid-range shooting. So we'll have to see what his overall is at the end of the episode. MC D'Antoni is a 6'6" point guard added very recently. Didn't get him, but we did get Milos Filipovic. So that is 3 out of our 4 scholarships allocated, and Filipovic, obviously not much known about him either. We're gonna have to move on to our 4th and final target. Our 4th and final scholarship, who will it go to? Well, since we already have 2 guards, I figured we could add another big guy, and I was torn between 2 6'10" JUCO prospects, the first of which being Darian Hardy. He comes from St. Louis, and Hardy seems like a blue-collar big, but man, I was going back and forth between these 2 guys. Cody Terrell has 30 pounds less than Hardy, but we're gonna break these guys down. So Hardy weighs in at 242, he has some meat on his bones, and his defense combined with his frame presents a low post presence we just don't have right now. Sorensen gets pushed around for positioning inside sometimes, and Swanson's game is more predicated in the mid-range area, so having a guy like Hardy with his broad shoulders and overall grit could be awesome for us. We lead on him, but we also lead on Corey Terrell. And despite also being 6'10" and also being a junior college baller, Terrell's game is much different than our boy Hardy's. So obviously the A- layup and well above average speed is what jumps off the page at you. Perhaps a sign that Terrell can be a front court member that runs the floor well. Again, that's something that this Fordham team just does not have. So both of these guys present different skills that we don't have, but overall, that's what makes it a very hard decision. Hardy has 1 more season of eligibility compared to Terrell. Hardy's also being pursued by 3 teams right now instead of Terrell just being pursued by us. So having 3 teams interested in Hardy, it kind of begs the question, what do those schools know that we don't? So I went back and forth a lot between Darian Hardy and Corey Terrell, but in the end, I decided to wrap up the recruiting class with Corey Terrell. I offered him our 4th and final scholarship over Hardy, which, looking back at it, I don't know, I might be overthinking a little bit, but it might have been a mistake. We're just so desperate to upgrade this offense that I've been trying to prioritize it over defense this offseason. But with Hardy's grit, frame, and extra season of development we would have had with him, I think he'd be the higher ceiling player. And at the end of the day, what this program is at right now, we're just not a very competitive team. I should be prioritizing upside and ceiling over either offense or defense. So that might have been a mistake on my part. You can let me know in the comments if you like Terrell or if you like my decision to stick with Terrell over Hardy. All in all, this is our recruiting class. We have 4 3-stars and 2 guards, 2 forwards, Dustin Black and Miles Filipovic, and forwards Chen Li and Corey Terrell. But it's time to find out our recruits' day 1 ratings as we look to mold them into valuable pieces to this Fordham puzzle. So Dustin Black will start out, go top to bottom. He is a 65 overall true freshman with nice offensive ratings out of the gate. Good inside outside score, 75 close and 75 3-point ratings, 81 off the dribble shot rating, good guard rebounder. Outside of that though, his skills need some work. He's a below average athlete, nothing on defense really stands out, and I think my consensus from when we first signed Dustin Black hasn't changed. He's gonna fit better as a 2 guard. So he doesn't really solve our point guard problem in recruiting, so perhaps this is a sign that Murphy will be our point guard of the future. Chen Li was our second commitment, 66 overall. In the first impression of his skills, to me, says he could be a poor man's Fabian Swanson. He can stretch his range to 15 feet. He's a sneaky good athlete, but his weaknesses, he lacks consistent offense in the paint, and that deep potential, man, that is a hard rating to look at. It begs the question, how much better will Chen Li get over his career? So that's not what you want to see. Corey Terrell enters year 2 with the highest potential rating at a B. Only one problem, we talked about it earlier, Corey is already a junior with his 2 seasons at JUCO ball, but you do like what you have to see. He's more than just a face-up 5. He has a low post rating of nearly 80, impressive close rating and layup abilities as well. It was expected that Terrell would be a good athlete, but we didn't know it would help him have an 80+ block rating. That's something we didn't expect. I didn't expect him to be a pretty good rim protector from day 1. Obviously his slight frame hurts him on the glass, but if we get him in the weight room, I think his 66 overall will become pretty misleading. I think he has a great chance of overplaying that rating. Finally, we have Milos Filipovic, who at a 64 overall, he seems like a redshirt type material for season 2. He's got a nice touch from anywhere inside the arc, decent mobility and ball handle ratings, and a decent C potential, but you just can't play him day 1 with those playmaking stats and lack of awareness ratings. He could also be an open door on defense if those ratings don't improve as well. So time to hop into our season 2 schedule, the pretty interesting and formidable opponents that will kick us off. So for the second year in a row, we open as underdogs on the road, this time at Utah State in the D.G. Smith Spectrum. Seating over 10,000 people, this is one of the hardest places to play in the country. I know you don't hear about it a lot, but if you haven't seen some of these fans and their choreographed chants, you gotta look them up on YouTube. It's gonna be a tough game and a tough environment, but I'm excited to play in a venue like this one. Then our home opener against Yale, and as you can see, I kind of toned down our out-of-conference opponents a little bit compared to last season. We have a lot more winnable games, hopefully some more confidence in the early goings. I think I bit off a little bit more than we can chew with how tough our year 1 schedule was. Our 4-team preseason tournament is November 10th, then we have Iona at home, of course led by Coach Pitino. We travel to Madison to face Wisconsin, who came into the preseason top 25 ranked 12th. Our schedule also eases up with the red flash of St. Francis, Ohio, Army, and then Tulsa as we face off against the number 1 recruit we missed out on, that coveted 2 guard who is an incredible athlete, Marcus Neal, who inked with Tulsa over us, so a bit of a revenge game there. And then St. John's in the legendary Carnesecca Arena. And then again, we close non-conference play with UT Martin just like we did last year, but this time at home. I think this will be the final matchup with UT Martin in this series. Maybe later on I'll play them again, but I think I'm satisfied with just a home and home for now, because looking at their roster, there's only a few real impact players still left from our coaching tenure there. I mean, you got Brian Gill, but Dusty Harrison's a senior. There's just not a lot left compared to like what we coached. So I think this will be our last battle with them as we seek revenge for the blowout loss they handed to us in Coach Carter's return a season ago. And when you look at our A10 schedule, we aren't dealing with nearly as tough of a lineup as last year. We went through a couple stretches where we played a lot of the good teams in the A10 back to back to back, but this time around, things definitely look a lot more even. There's a lot less long road trips like we saw last year as well. And I think all this bodes well for us as we try to improve on our 3-13 finish within the conference a season ago. We're looking for our first appearance in the conference tournament, and I think that'll be our season goal for year 2. The A10 postseason would definitely help us add some respectability, and will make our lives in recruiting a lot easier moving forward. Like I did for last season, I'm going to have our high school prospects highlight tapes be its own episode, and that'll be the last preseason episode next time you see me before tipping off year 2 at Utah State. That will wrap up this first off season of Fordham basketball, everybody. We've had some goals that we try to hit, and I think we did an okay job answering some questions. The biggest one being, how could we improve this offense that ranked second to last in the A10 last season? Moving Murphy to point guard may help, and I think Dustin Black and Corey Terrell both have a good chance to outperform their overall ratings with their skill sets in their first season here at Fordham, and I think they have a good chance of adding some new life for this offense off the bench. Evangelo Higgins is up to a 75 overall. Cade Sorensen added almost 10 pounds of weight in the offseason. And we'll also see 2 of the most efficient players from last year's roster, Fabian Swanson and Stanton Scott, receive starters minutes moving forward, and we could easily reap the benefits of that for sure as they head into their starting roles. Next time you see me, we'll be jumping into the recruiting preview video. We have a lot of targets on the board, including some familiar faces. As you can see, I added the main guys from the movie like Worm, Junior Battle, Kenyon Damian Carter, Jason Lyle, and last but certainly not least, my boy Timo Cruz, my favorite character. Some of them are seniors, some are juniors, and we'll be following their paths to the college game, and if we're lucky, we can perhaps score a Timo Cruz or Damian. We'll have to see about all that, but that's all I have for you today. Thanks for joining me. Hope you enjoyed this video as we continue to charge forward and hopefully improve on a 6-20 record from a season ago. A lot of work to do still, and I don't think we've solved every problem, but the upside is there, and if we can build off the flashes we showed in year 1, I think we can maybe turn some heads in the conference here in season 2. Alright everyone, that'll wrap up season 1's off-season video. This is College Sports Revive signing out. Stay tuned for our preseason recruiting special and our season 2 tip-off coming soon. Have a great night, guys, and stay tuned for more.